Walt, and this week's quest is when things get tough, who you gonna call? It looks like the quest is on. We all have had that moment when we are caught between a rock and a hard spot. And I pray that the rock is Jesus Christ, which means you took a bad step and slipped. Now that's called an oopsie. Now, who you want to call? In Psalm 40, verse 2, now this is out of the New King James Version, we read, "He also brought me up out of a horrible pit, out of the miry clay, and set my feet upon a rock, and established my steps." What's your perspective of this verse? Or what's the sound of the voice you hear when you read this verse? I know for me, I hear my mother. Now she's passed away now. But my mom was a typical black mom. And this is what I would hear. "Boy, I just pulled you out of that stinky pit, and now you're covered in miry clay. Do you know how hard that stuff is to get out of your clothes? Now sit over here on this rock until I come back. And you better not move. And if you move off that rock, you'll have more than just skinned knees and elbows to deal with. You're going to have to deal with me." Now that was the voice I heard. I would hear how angry and frustrated she would be. And that became the touchstone for how I heard God. I pray that your perspective and take of this verse is a whole lot better. Now, I have to admit that if I had slipped off that rock, my mother would have been right there with the iodine and some Band-Aids and a hug. You know what? I think she would also slap me upside my head for making her worry about me. Now, here's a question. Who are you? The reason I ask that is because we're all known differently by other people. I'll use myself as an example. I'm a son, a father, an uncle, a brother, a cousin, a friend. And I'm also known as stupid and dumb. That was my stepfather. So, you know that God is known by or can be known in different ways. Theologians say that God has 7 redemptive names. There is probably more, but I think that's a good start, don't you? So, who you want to call? The Lord your healer? The Lord your banner or refuge? The Lord who is present? The Lord your righteousness? The Lord your peace? The Lord your provider? The Lord your shepherd? So, who you want to call? Well, who do you need? That makes sense, doesn't it? Who do you need? So, I think that our opinion of ourselves is so low that we talk ourselves out of most of the good stuff God has for us. Well, at least that is what I did in the example that I gave you, how I heard scripture. So if he heals, but I never seen him heal. He's righteous, but I can't see how he's righteousness for me. Or he's a shepherd, but maybe it's difficult for me to get my head around livestock and shepherds. It would be hard for you or me to see him in our present situation because he's present. Maybe that's the problem that we have that we don't understand the word redemption. It's not just to be redeemed from something, it is also being redeemed into something. Let's go back to Psalm 40, this time out of the Passion Translation, and we'll start reading from verse 1. I waited and waited and waited some more, patiently knowing God would come through for me. Then, at last, he bent down and listened to my cry. He stooped down and lifted me out of danger from the desolate pit I was in, out of the muddy mess I had fallen into. Now he's lifted me up into a firm, secure place and steadied me while I walked along his ascending path. A new song for a new day rises up in me every time I think about how he breaks through for me. Ecstatic praise pours out of my lips until everyone hears how God has set me free. Oh my gosh, if that doesn't make you a puddle on the floor, I don't know what would. How awesome is our God? Now, redemption is a repurchase of captured goods or prisoners, the act of procuring the deliverance of prisoners or things from the possession and power of captives by the payment of an equivalent, a ransom. In theology, the purchase of God's favor by the death and suffering of Christ. The ransom or deliverance of sinners from the bondage of sin and the penalties of God's violated law by atonement of Christ, in whom we have redemption through his blood. I think that kind of wraps it up, don't you? Look at Romans chapter 10, starting in verse 12. We're going to read down to verse 14. This time, the New King James Version. It reads, "For there is no distinction between Jew and Greek, for the same Lord over all is rich to all who call upon him. For whoever calls on the name of the Lord shall be saved. How then shall they call on him in whom they have not believed? And how shall they believe in him of whom they have not heard? And how shall they hear without a preacher? And how shall they preach unless they be sent? As it is written." Who you want to call? Maybe the first call should be to the shepherd. But that would mean you would have to see yourself as a lamb. Or maybe a sheep. Why? Because he says, "My sheep hear my voice." Oh my gosh. Are you going to call on the one who called you first? You know, in John chapter 10, Jesus said, "I call my sheep by name." Oh my gosh. So, who you want to call? He who first called you and who loved you before you even knew him. The one who will become who you need him to be. Now that's love. And you know what? That's my heart. Now, if you would like a copy of the 7 redemptive names of God, reach out to me at walkwithgod@gmail.com and I'll send you a copy. God bless you, and you have an awesome day finding out who you want to call. And God bless you.